Two women in chains on a floor of black stone. One of them silver, chin up, green eyes burning a hole straight through me. One of them blue, so pale she was almost transparent, head down, shoulders shaking. 40,000 aliens leaning forward in the dark. And a voice coming out of the walls telling me to pick one. I want you to understand something. I knew exactly what happens to a man who tells an emperor no. I knew it before I opened my mouth. I had watched it happen from inside a cell. I said it anyway. I choose neither. That is the moment everyone talks about. That is the moment the arena went so quiet you could hear a chain move. It was not the moment that mattered. The moment that mattered came 11 seconds later, and it did not happen to me. I wiped the blood off my mouth with the back of my hand and looked down at the thing I had just taken apart. It was still bleeding. 3 meters of armored Gravash, 4 arms, not one of them moving. One had folded the wrong way underneath its chest on the way down. The blood coming out of it was black, and it was spreading across the stone toward my boots, and I did not step back, because the whole arena was watching me, and 9 fights had taught me what they do to a man who steps back. I was still standing. That was the problem. I did not know it yet, but that was the problem. The crowd was screaming. Blue skin and 4 arms and open mouths, tier after tier of them climbing up until the lights gave out and I could not see where the seats ended. They had been screaming for 11 minutes straight. My left arm was open from shoulder to wrist where the claws went through. My right leg would not take my weight. Somewhere underneath all of that my ribs were trying to tell me something, and I did not have time to listen. That was 10. 10 fights. 10 wins. And in the Vharsen Dominion, 10 is the number that cuts a prisoner loose. So I stood there bleeding on their stone, and I waited for somebody to open a door. The horn sounded 3 times, and the screaming stopped like a door slamming. High above the floor, on a platform hanging in the air on nothing, I could see, Emperor Sork stood up out of his chair. Old. Vharsen blue faded almost to bone, 4 thin arms, gold rings, stacked wrist to elbow on every one of them. The crowd was looking at me like meat. He was not. He was looking at me the way a man looks at something he is halfway through reading. His herald stepped forward in crimson and gold, and when he spoke the voice came out of the walls. The human has won 10 times. The law is old, and the law is generous. He has earned his reward. Reward. Not release, not passage, not a door. Reward. And that is when I finally put it together, 4 months too late. Down in the dark, I had listened to 9 other men get called up for their 10th fight. Every one of them won. Not one of them ever came back to tell us what freedom looked like. Nobody walks out of here. They just stop calling it a cage. 2 guards came out onto the sand. They were walking 2 women in chains. The first one was silver. Not pale, not gray. Silver, like something poured and cooled, throwing the floodlights right back at them. Platinum hair braided tight against her skull with small, dark rings worked through it. 3 scars across her left cheekbone, old and clean and earned. Tall built like a soldier, chin up, and when her eyes came around and found me, they were green and lit from somewhere inside, and every bit of what was in them was a promise about what she would do to me the second those cuffs came off. The second one was blue, so pale she was barely there. At her wrists and her throat, the skin thinned out enough to show something faintly glowing underneath. Black hair, long fallen forward across half her face. She was looking at the floor. Her shoulders were shaking. She was working very hard at making no sound. They boarded my ship 4 months back on a supply run to the Rim colonies. I spent 4 days in a cell learning one thing about the Dominion. They do not take prisoners. They take inventory. Standing on that stone, I finally understood what I was looking at. 2 more items on the list, and a human being invited to sign for one. The herald let the crowd have a long look at both of them. Caliph of the Sundraki, taken in the 9th Fleet action. A warrior. The silver one did not move. Usold of the Navari, taken at the Archive World. A scholar. The blue one closed her eyes. By the law of victory, the human may choose one. She will be his property, and she will serve him for the remainder of her life. And then he said the part I had never heard from down in the cells, because from down there you only ever catch the roar after it is over. The one who is not chosen returns to the pits. I stood in the middle of that arena with blood running off my fingertips, and I did the math. Every single one of them had already done it. That is why they went so quiet. They were not waiting to see which woman I wanted. They were waiting to see which one I would kill. Take the warrior, the scholar goes back underground. Take the scholar, the warrior goes back underground. Take neither, they both go back underground, and I go down with them, because turning down a gift from an emperor is not a thing that has a survivable name. There was no clean way out. That was the design. Somebody built this thing very carefully so that there would be no clean way out. The crowd started to chant. I started walking. My boots on that stone were the loudest thing in the world, 40 meters of black rock, and every step I took I could hear them lean in. I stopped in front of the two women. Caliph looked straight back at me. She did not flinch, and she did not blink. She had already decided exactly what I was. Uzzled would not lift her head. I stood there long enough for all of them to be sure. Long enough for every alien in that stadium to pick which way it was going to go. Then I turned my back on both of them, and I looked up at that platform, and I said it loud enough to reach the top tier. I choose neither. Nothing happened. Nothing happened for 1 full second, and then 2, and the silence went out across that arena like something spilled. Even Sorak did not move. Then one of the guards stepped forward and hit Usold across the back. She went down onto one knee on the stone. She did not cry out. She did not make a sound at all, and somehow that was worse, because it meant she was used to it. But Caliph did. Caliph made one low furious noise, and she was not looking at the guard when she made it. She was looking at me. The herald did not know what to do. I watched him figure it out in real time. 4 arms, crimson robes, a voice that came out of the walls, and no idea what came next. He looked at me. He looked up at the platform. He looked at the 2 women on the sand. Then he looked up at the platform again, and he held there waiting. 10,000 years of law, every possible outcome written down and filed and ruled on. And not one line in it for a man who says no. That is the thing nobody tells you about an empire. It is not strong because it is cruel. It is strong because it is complete. It has an answer for everything. Take away the question, and the whole machine stands there humming with nowhere to put its hands. Sorak made one small motion with the lowest of his 4 arms. The herald straightened up. Refusal of the reward is refusal of the law. The law is the emperor. To refuse it is to insult him. A pause. The penalty is death. That was fine. I had known that going in. I called back up at the platform, and I made sure my voice carried. And them? The herald hesitated. He glanced upward again, got whatever he got, and turned back to me. They will be executed alongside you. Their deaths will pay for your insult. Crowd liked that. 40,000 of them made a sound like a wave coming in. I let them have it. Because that answer was the only thing I had wanted out of the last 90 seconds, and now I had it in front of witnesses. Understand what he had just done. He had tied their lives to mine. Not by my choosing. By his own law, out of his own mouth, in front of an entire stadium. Which meant from that second forward, anything that kept me breathing had to keep them breathing too. I had walked in with nothing. Now I had a lever. I put my hands out where the guards could see them, and I raised my voice one more time. I have information about human fleet movements, defensive positions, weaknesses your generals would pay for. I let that sit. I will give it to your emperor, face to face, or you can execute me in about a minute and never hear a word of it. The arena went quiet in a different way than before. Everyone in the Dominion knew the war was coming. Everyone knew it was humans on the other side of it. Sorak stayed on his feet for a long moment. Then he turned and spoke to the 2V, Vharsen standing behind his chair, and he spoke for some time, and I could not hear one word of it. The herald came back with the answer. The emperor grants the audience. Be warned, human. If what you carry is worthless, your death will be slow, and the females will go first, and you will be made to watch all of it. The guards closed in around me. I did not look at Caliph or Usold as they took me off the sand. I could not afford to. The corridors under the palace were carved out of the same black stone as the arena floor, and every meter of them was covered in relief work. The Vharsen victories, species I did not recognize kneeling in rows, cities on fire, done in careful detail by an artist who had taken his time. They had been doing this a long while. 2 guards walked on either side of me. They did not shove me, and they did not talk down to me, which I noticed. I had won in their arena, in a warrior culture that buys you something, even when you are walking to your own execution. Behind me, I could hear the chains on the women's ankles dragging on stone. We climbed. The corridors opened out and got brighter. Gold work on the walls, carpet thick enough to swallow the sound of boots. Whatever was up here was worth more than the entire district I grew up in. At the top there was a door made of metal and set with stones, and it opened without anyone touching it. The Emperor's chamber was big enough to fly a shovel through. The ceiling went up past where the light reached. Lamps hung in the air with nothing holding them. Plants I had never seen grew out of pots that were probably worth a colony ship each. Sorek sat in a chair that changed color depending on where you stood. Guards at every door. Caliph and Usold forced down onto their knees on the floor to my right. And then the Emperor of the Vharsen Dominion spoke to me in English. Not close to English. English clean without an accent, better than mine. So, the human who will not take his prize. I did not let him see it land. Adrian Vale, Earth Defense Force. You will want to know why they were the reward. He shifted one of his forearms. You may as well. It costs me nothing now. Then tell me. We have been hearing stories about your species for 11 years. That a human will spend his own life on a stranger. That a human will refuse an advantage if the advantage has a person underneath it. The black eyes did not move off me. Our analysts do not believe it. It does not survive contact with any model of a species that reached space. So we built a test. The floor went out from under me, and I kept my face exactly where it was. Gold, ships, land. He could have offered me any of it. He offered me 2 women in chains, because he wanted to see what I would do with them. The whole thing, the arena, the 10 fights, the ceremony. It had never been about the fighting at all. They had been running an experiment, and I had been living inside it for 4 months without ever once seeing the walls. And, I said, what did you learn? That the stories are true. He almost sounded pleased, which makes your species either very noble or very stupid. I have not yet decided whether those are different things. Give me a minute, and I will make the case for stupid. I sat down without being asked. One of the guards moved and Sorek stopped him with a finger. Then, I started lying. I gave him fleet positions, rotation schedules for the outer picket line, a gap in the meridian corridor that would open every 41 days, and the exact sensor blind it opened behind. I gave him supply failures at 3 depots and the names of the officers responsible. I gave him a defensive doctrine that would fold if you hit it from below the ecliptic. None of it was real. All of it was built on things that were. That is the only way this works. You cannot hand a man a lie. He will feel the weight is wrong. You hand him something true, and something true, and something true, and then you hand him the one you made, and by then his hands have stopped checking. He asked good questions, better than I wanted. Twice he came at a detail from an angle I had not prepared for, and I had to build the answer while my mouth was already moving. When I finished, he sat for a while. Why? He said. Because we lose. I put everything I had into making that sound tired instead of rehearsed. You have more ships, better guns, and a 400-year head start. When it starts, my people burn. I have watched your arena for 4 months. I would rather be standing on the right side of it. You would sell your species. I would survive my species. And your price. Both of them. I did not look over at the women when I said it. Not one. Both. For the first time, Sorek moved his head. The law permits one. You are the law. You said so an hour ago in front of 40,000 people. Explain the request. So I gave him the only argument that could possibly work on a man like that. Because if I walk back into human space with 2 alien women in collars, I am finished. Forever. There is no version of me that goes home after that. My own people will hate me more than yours ever could. I lean forward. You will not have to trust me. I will have nowhere else on this side of the galaxy to be. The chamber was very quiet. I had just talked myself into being a slaver in front of the 2 people it would be done to, and I could feel Calith's eyes on the side of my face like a hand on a knife. Sorek stood up. He was much taller than I had understood. He walked, 4 arms folded behind him, all the way around the room and back. Accepted, he said. You will be given a vessel. It will carry monitoring equipment, and you will not attempt to find all of it, because you will not succeed. Understood. You will send your first report in 30 days. Understood. He stopped in front of my chair and looked down at me, and the black eyes had nothing in them I could read. 30 days, Adrian Vale. I am curious what you will have become by then. I have gone over that sentence 1,000 times since. I still do not know if he was threatening me, or warning me, or if he had already seen the whole thing from beginning to end and simply wanted to watch it happen. Take them, he said. The guards moved us out, down through the gold, down through the stone, down past the carvings of the burning cities, out to a landing platform where a small gray ship sat waiting with its ramp already down. I walked up that ramp with two women behind me who both believed I had just bought them. And behind me, at the bottom of the hull, a Vharsen technician knelt down at the seam above the engine housing, fitted a flat black device into the gap, and sealed the plating shut over it. I never saw him do it. Here is the trap they put me in, and I want to be clear that I walked into it with my eyes open. 14 days to human space. One small ship, 3 people on board, cameras in every compartment and microphones in the ones the cameras could not see. I could not tell them. Not Calith, not Usold, not once, not in a whisper, not on paper. The second either of them understood what I was actually doing, it would show. In a shoulder, in a look, in the way a woman stops flinching when a man walks past her chair. The Vharsen were not watching for a confession. They were watching for behavior. And 2 prisoners who suddenly stopped acting like prisoners would tell them everything in about 4 seconds. So the deal was simple. To keep them alive for 14 days, they had to hate me for 14 days. I unlocked their ankle chains the first hour we were underway. There is nowhere to run, I said, loud for the walls. There is nothing out there but vacuum for 11 days in any direction. That was for the listeners. The rest of it was for the 2 of them, and I could not say the rest of it out loud. Calith stood up slowly, worked the stiffness out of her legs, and spent about a minute walking the perimeter of the main cabin. She was not stretching. She was counting exits, checking the weight of things, and working out how long it would take to cross the room and get her hands on my throat. Usold stayed where she was and rubbed her wrists where the metal had left marks. Neither of them thanked me. I would have thought less of them if they had. Day 4, she came for me. I was at the navigation console with my back to the cabin. I did not hear her cross the floor, which tells you everything about Sundraki training, because that deck plating groaned if you looked at it wrong. What I heard was the air move. I went sideways off the chair, and a strip of torn hull bracing came down through the space my head had been in and hit the console instead. It went through the console. She came at me, again before the sparks were out. She was faster than me, and she was stronger than me. And the only thing I had was that she had never fought a human before, and did not know what our joints do. I got inside the second swing, turned her wrist over, and the bracing came loose and went across the deck. Then I let go of her and stepped back with my hands up. That confused her more than anything I could have done. I am not your enemy, I said. You paid for me. Her voice was low and flat. You stood in front of him and you asked for both of us. I heard you. You did. Then say it plainly. What are you? I could not answer that, not with the walls listening. Ask me again in 10 days, I said. She spat on the deck between my boots and walked away, and I turned around and looked at what she had done to my console. The forward comms array was gone, not damaged, gone. I had 26 days until my first report was due to an emperor who had promised what would happen if it never came, and I had just lost the only thing on that ship capable of sending it. The clock stopped being a date on a calendar right then and turned into a fuse. Day 8 was the worst day of my life, and I include the arena in that. She came at me in the galley, and she came at me directly under a camera housing I had mapped on the second day in the open, with a clear line of sight to the lens. I got the knife away from her. That part was easy. The hard part came after. Because a Vharsen master watching that footage would expect one thing to happen next, and if it did not happen, then I was not a Vharsen master. I was a human running a game, and if I was a human running a game, then somewhere on the far side of that hull a decision would get made, and a Dominion cutter would come alongside us inside of a day, and all 3 of us would be dead by the end of the week. They needed to see a slave being disciplined. So I gave them one. I am not going to describe it. I have described worse things in this account, and I will describe worse things before it is finished, and I am not describing this. It took about 90 seconds. It was cold. It was efficient. I did not raise my voice once, because a man who has to shout has lost control of his property, and control was the entire performance. Calith did not make a sound the whole time. When it was over, she got up off the galley floor by herself, and she stood there breathing, and she looked at me the way you look at something you have finally identified. In the arena, I had turned my back on an emperor, rather than own another person. 6 days later, I put my hands on one to keep her alive, and there is no version of that sentence I have ever been able to make it right. Usold watched all of it from the corridor. She did not say one word. Day 10, she informed on me. I came around the corner into the sleeping compartment and Usold was standing at the wall panel where the second camera was seated, and she was speaking directly into it. Quietly, steadily, in Vharsen. I did not speak Vharsen, but I did not need to. I had spent 4 months in their cells, and I knew what tone a person uses when they are reporting something. She was telling them about me. I stood in that doorway and I understood that everything I had built was now sitting in the hands of a frightened archivist who owed me nothing and had every reason on this side of the galaxy to sell me out. I did not stop her. If I stopped her, the Watchers would know I had something to hide. So I stood there and let a woman hand me to my executioners, and then I turned around and walked back to the cabin and sat down. Caliph had seen it too. She said something short and hard in her own language. I did not need a translation for that either. Usold came and sat down across from us with her hands in her lap and her head down and said nothing at all. 4 days left. Day 12 she cornered me in the cargo hold and this time she brought a real one. A maintenance cutter off the tool rack. Powered. It would have gone through my sternum without slowing down. There was nothing behind me but bulkhead. There was no console to roll off. My hand was 14 centimeters from the panel that would have brought the ship's security systems down on her, and she knew it was there, and she came anyway because she had decided that dying on her feet beat one more day of this. I looked at her. Then I got down on my knees on the deck plating and bowed my head. I heard her stop. I reached into my jacket slowly, and I took out the restraint key and held it up without looking at her. 7739, I said. That opens the cuffs. It opens the hold. It opens the outer hatch on manual override. Why? Because a person should get to choose what happens to them. My voice came out worse than I wanted it to. That is the whole thing. That is all of it. That is what I would not do in that arena, and it is what I have been doing to you for 8 days, and I am done doing it. The hold was quiet except for the engines. She could have taken my head off. It would have taken her half a second, and there was not one thing on that ship that could have stopped her. Instead, I heard the cutter power down. She took the key out of my hand. Her fingers were cold. I will be watching you, she said. I would think less of you if you were not. She was still standing over me when Usold spoke from the hatchway. He cannot tell you. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. So I will. Caliph turned. Usold came into the hold. Her head was up. First time I had seen it. There are 31 devices on this ship, she said. I have found 28. I have been feeding them a story since the day we left, because the story they were sent to look for is a human being corrupted, and if they do not find it, they will come and take the ship. She looked at me and then back at Caliph. When I speak into the wall, I tell them he is getting worse. I tell them he is hardening. Tell them the human is becoming one of us. Something moved across her face that was almost too small to see. I have been protecting him from the inside since the first hour, and he does not know that I know what he is, and he has never once asked me to lie for him. Caliph did not move. On day 8, Usold said, I told them he broke you. And then, very carefully, to Caliph. I am sorry. It was the only sentence that would keep the cutters away. I sat on the deck of that cargo hold with my knees under me and looked up at the smallest, most frightened person on board, who had been running a counterintelligence operation against an interstellar empire for 11 days without a single person alive knowing she was doing it. Caliph looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached down, took Usold's wrist, turned it over, and put the restraint key into her hand. The long watch came out of nothing and put a targeting lock on us 11 hours short of the border. Small ship, ugly in the specific way that human warships are ugly, because we build them to work and not to be looked at. Every gun she had was pointed at our bow. Unidentified vessel, this is Captain Imogen Havard, Earth Defense Force. You are carrying Vharsen drive signatures inside a human corridor. Identify it or be fired on. I opened the channel. Adrian Vale, Earth Defense Force, 47129. I have been in Dominion custody 4 months and I am coming home with their fleet doctrine in my head. A pause on the other end that went on slightly too long. Vale, you were logged killed in action. Not yet. She boarded us with 4 Marines, and she did not lower her weapon for the first 90 seconds. Mid-40s, gray hair cut short, pale eyes that went around my cabin once and catalogued everything in it, including the 2 alien women standing at the far bulkhead in Dominion restraints. Explain them. Property, I said. Gifts from the Emperor. Proof of my value. I watched her decide not to react to that. Then explain what you brought me. So I gave it to her. All of it, the way I had given it to Sorek. Fleet rotations. The Meridian Corridor gap on a 41-day cycle. 3 depot failures with officers named. A doctrine that folds from below the ecliptic. And salted through the middle of it in a flat voice, without emphasis. A picket rotation run by the 9th Auxiliary, which has not existed since the reorganization. A depot on Callaway Station serving a population of 9 million, on a rock that has never held more than 40,000. A defensive grid keyed to phase inverted mass drivers, which are a thing humans have never built, because they cannot be built. Havard's face did not change, not once. But somewhere in the middle of the Callaway line, she stopped writing. She let me finish. She asked 3 follow-up questions, all of them about things that were true, and none of them about the 3 that were not. Then she said, "Captain, I'd like to speak with the prisoners privately," and she said the word prisoners with a very small amount of weight on it, and I understood that we were now having 2 conversations at once and only one of them was out loud. She talked to Calith and Ussold for 20 minutes with the hatch shut. I never got the full transcript of it. Ussold told me later that Havard asked 1 question at the start, and then let them talk. She asked what I had done to them. Calith told her about day 8, all of it, flatly, the way a soldier files a report. And then she told her why. The Meridian Assembly does not look like a place where anything is decided. It looks like a place where things are recorded. Hailstone, cold light coming down from a ceiling too high to make out, and delegations from 91 species arranged in rings that go up and back until the faces stop being faces. Emperor Sorek sat at the center of it, in restraints. They had not taken the gold off his arms. I do not know if that was respect or a message. It took 9 weeks to get there. Havard's report went to General Okonkwo, and Okonkwo's went to the Assembly, and what carried it was never the fleet doctrine. False intelligence wins you 1 battle. 2 witnesses to a slave trade win you 91 governments. Ussold testified for 2 hours. She named 43 transports, 16 holding worlds, and the archive world where they took her, and she did it without notes because Navari archivists do not need notes. Calith testified for 11 minutes. She did not need longer. And when it was done, the Dominion's advocate rose, and he was not angry, and that is when I understood that we were about to lose. The Assembly will strike both testimonies, he said. The chamber went quiet. Under Article 6 of the Concordance, property does not give testimony. Property is not a witness. Property is evidence, and evidence does not speak. He turned, 4 arms folded, entirely calm. Both females were lawfully transferred out of Dominion custody on the 16th day of the 9th cycle. The transfer was executed. The transfer was witnessed by 40,000 citizens. At the moment of transfer, they ceased to be persons under concordance law. He let that sit. They cannot testify to what was done to them, because at the time it was done, under the law of this assembly, they were not anyone. I want you to understand what that man had just done. The only reason those 2 women were alive and standing in that chamber was the deal I made, and the deal I made was the exact instrument that erased them. Every step I took to save them had been building the argument that would bury them. Sorek had known. He had known in that room with the floating lamps, and he had signed anyway, and he had told me to my face that he was curious what I would become. He had not been threatening me. He had been waiting for this. Calith turned and looked at me across the chamber, and there was no accusation in it at all, which was worse. Ussold did not look at me. She was looking at the advocate, and her head was up. I stood. Point of record, I said. The transfer document. The advocate inclined his head, patient. It has been entered. It is the basis of the motion. Then read the receiving party. Nothing moved in that chamber for a while. Read it out loud, I said. Every transfer under Article 6 requires a receiving owner. Read who signed as owner. He did not have to read it. I could see the moment he remembered. I never signed. I had asked Sorek for both of them, and I had argued for it, and I had let him believe he had bought me with it. But a human signature on a Vharsen property instrument is not worth the plate it is etched on, and Sorek knew that better than anyone in the room, so he had done what an emperor does. He signed it himself. He held the title. which meant that document was never a transfer at all. It was a declaration, filed with the Meridian Assembly, in the Emperor's own hand and under the Emperor's own seal, stating that the Vharsen Dominion held 2 named thinking beings as property. The advocate had entered it into the record himself, 4 minutes earlier, to win. "You are right," I said. "They cannot testify." I sat down. They do not have to. The vote took 40 minutes. 91 delegations, 91 for. The last thing said in that chamber was not said by me, and I have always been glad about that. When the restraints closed, and they took Sorok off the floor, his advocate stood alone at the center of all that pale stone with the document still open in front of him, and he said it more or less to himself, the way a man does when he is correcting a file. Amend the record. The human did not take the prize. He closed it. He took the receipt.